I'm Jeff Faulkner with another video on the what I think is the geography of the Book of Mormon. Now, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints takes no official position on the geography or the geographical setting of the Book of Mormon. But I think I can lay out some essential points, some essential elements that you must find if you're going to try to search it out and discover where the Book of Mormon took place. Now, one thing that you should find, or that you should require for the region where the Book of Mormon events took place, is that there has to be a land southward and a land northward. There has to be a West Sea, which runs the full length of the region. There has to be an East Sea, which runs the full length of the region, this part of the East Sea over here. Now, the land southward is divided into the land of Nephi, south of a narrow strip of wilderness, and north of that narrow strip of wilderness is the vast East Wilderness. And to the west, you have the Grijalva River Basin, which is the river basin of the Sidon River. This is the land of Zarahemla. This river and the Usumacinta River, running through the East Wilderness, they meet here at the Gulf of Mexico, and near their junction is the land of Jershon and the land of Antionum. You have to have a narrow neck of land that separates the land southward from the land northward. The narrow neck of land has to have a floodplain that takes up about a third of its distance across. This floodplain has to be at the north end of it, and the land northward has to have had an early or mother civilization much earlier than the civilizations in the land southward. This is the Olmec, or the Book of Mormon Jaredite lands, and the Jaredites started from about 22 to 2400 BC. They moved down toward the isthmus and established the great city of Lib right here at around 1200 BC, which was in the place where the sea divides the land at the narrow neck of land. Now, the land southward is nearly surrounded by water. It has to be. That's one of the essential elements. And it's separated from the land northward by this narrow neck. The land of Nephi is a highland area, in this case highland Guatemala, and it has to have a highly advanced early civilization in the mid-pre-classic, from about 1500 down to 300 BC. It has to have a high early civilization with a lot of infrastructure, with a state-level civic organization, with a highly developed religion. There has to be a capital area, which in this case is the city of Nephi, or today it's called Guatemala City. And 80 miles to the west, you have a lake, and a place with many rivers and fountains where water is coming up out of the earth. This is the waters of Mormon, which later becomes a Nephite cult center, or I should say the Nehor cult center. Remember that you have the city of Jerusalem, Mokum, Oriha, Helam, and Amulon, and some other cities. There are 7 satellite cities around the city of Nephi here, 7 lands and cities that are converted by the sons of Mosiah. Now, the warfare is back and forth from north of the narrow strip of wilderness to the south of the narrow strip of wilderness, back and forth. The Lamanites occupying the land of Nephi and most of this great east wilderness. The Lamanites' civilization originates in the highland of Guatemala, but it spills over into the lowlands part of Guatemala early, again in the mid-pre-classic. There's a great deal of interaction between these two regions. The early Maya, or Lehitic people, and the later ones in the lowland area. It's the Petén rainforest, and that's the Yucatan Peninsula up here. Now, in the latter chapters of the book of Alma, from chapter 43 through 62, you have a great deal of warfare back and forth. And first Zarahemnah, the Lamanite leader, marches down through here to attack the Nephites in the land of Zarahemnah. Then later Amalickiah becomes king. He's a Nephite, he becomes king. He tries attacking along the Pacific coast, but he fails. Then he sends his army. They fail. Then he comes down at the head of his army along the Usumacinta River. This is where the Lamanites redeploy their armies back and forth. They mass their army in the land of Antionum, which was Zoramite land, but the Zoramites, as you might recall, become Lamanites. The Nephites moved the people of Ammon from the land of Jershon over to the land of Melech, and the Nephites deploy their armies along the Grijalva River, or the Sidon, into the land of Jershon, and they prepare for a warfare across this boundary. But the Lamanites withdraw, come back around here, and try to attack through the land of Manti. This is near the headwaters, north of the headwaters of the Sidon River. Now, Moroni establishes 7 garrison cities in the northern part of the East Wilderness after he drives the Lamanite squatters southward. He drives the Lamanites down toward their own lands, which run in a straight course from the east to the west, as we read in Alma 50. And he establishes garrison cities here. Later, we read about Helaman and how his stripling warriors marched down across the land of Zarahemnah to the aid of Antipas in the city of Judea. And there's warfare here in this region in seven cities, including Melech. Now, these 7 cities up here that Moroni fortifies as garrison cities, and these 7 down here, these 2 zones constitute the northeast and the southwest theaters of war. This to the archaeologist, with the land of Zarahemnah right in between, is what they call the Mixozochimaya interaction zone, the interaction zone between the Mulekite and remnant of the Jaredite peoples up here and the Nephite Lamanite peoples down here. This is the Mixozochimaya interaction zone, which corresponds exactly to the narrative in the Book of Mormon. This interaction zone, or this line of warfare back and forth, dissolves around the time of Christ. So, see, this is where this line of fortifications is, and we'll read about that later in Alma chapter 50. Up here, I already talked about the Olmec people, which are the Jaredites, and here, of course, is the hill Cumorah, and this is the isthmus. This is the Laguna Superior and Laguna Inferior, where Haggith built his ships and sailed northward, and also the conquistador Hernan Cortez built shipyards here and built ships to ship timber up into the land northward, the same as they did around the time of Haggith in 50 BC. So that's another one of the interesting correspondences. Okay, now, as for this line right here of fortifications and how Captain Moroni fortified the northern part of the East Wilderness from the land of Jershon westward to the land of Bountiful. This land of Bountiful was used as a barrier to hem in the Lamanites into the land southward. The land Bountiful ran across the southward part of the narrow neck of land, or the isthmus. Bountiful was a barrier. These two zones of warfare, or theaters of war, or quarters, that Mormon calls them, and running through Zarahemnah, divided the peoples. Now let's take a look at this Alma chapter 50, verse 11. This is a critical verse that describes this theme here of the Mixozochimaya interaction zone. Alma 50:11. And thus he cut off all the strongholds of the Lamanites in the east wilderness, with those garrison cities, and also on the west, fortifying the line between the Nephites and the Lamanites, between the land of Zarahemnah and the land of Nephi, from the west sea, running by the head of the river Sidon. This is the line running from the west sea by the head of the river Sidon. The Nephites possessing all the land northward, even all the land which was northward of the land bountiful. All this land they kept as a refuge in case they had to flee. And later at the end of the book we see that they did. Which was northward of the land bountiful according to their pleasure. Now, so what are the essential elements? You have to have a land southward, nearly surrounded by water, a land northward. They have to be divided by an isthmus. You have to have a west sea running the full length of the Book of Mormon region. You have to have an east sea. Now this is a single west sea and a single east sea. Lakes won't cut it. If you see any model that doesn't have all of these essential elements, and by the way, this, the waters of Mormon, down here, it's about 80 miles from the city of Nephi. These cities went underwater around the time of the crucifixion of the Lord Jesus Christ. And they're being studied right now by the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. This is the area of Samabaj, which was a Nehor cult center corresponding to the city of Ammonihah up here, which was another Nehor cult center. This Nehor cult apparently originated with the Olmec or the Jaredites and was carried by the Mulekites being vectors, carrying this false religion and other false ideas of government down into the region from the land northward to the land southward. The Mulekites kind of melded with the remnant of the Jaredites to form the Mishisoke, or the Epi-Olmec, as the archaeologists call them. And that's the story. Those are the essential elements. If you don't find them, don't waste your time on the model.